Welcome back, Honors, and welcome back, Chappelle. All right, so welcome back to both classes in both sections right now because I decided to actually record one joint flip that goes over all the big 7 Enlightenment thinkers that we started talking about today in class, and also to use as a reference for when we get close to that oncoming test that's going to happen right after Mardi Gras break. So you can use this as a study source and a piece of study material. So you can always be able to go back, reference it again, listen to it like it's a podcast on your way to school that day to make sure you're going to know these big 7 people, right? Because these big 7 people are so important to the progression of the 1700s and understanding how people are going to react to this crazy absolutist era that we just got done with, right? And also, we're going to be moving next into something that some of y'all might know a little bit about already, the American Revolution, right? So go ahead, go watch Hamilton, figure your life out, and we'll get there when we get there, right? But the big thing about it is, though, we're starting off with the fact that we got 7, count them, 7 big Enlightenment thinkers to talk about. Now, when you're talking about these big Enlightenment thinkers, you have to start off with the fact that the Enlightenment is basically the scientific revolution of government and ideas, right? So what's going to end up happening is that the scientific revolution came along and solved a lot of the world's issues. Where are we in space? Do we go around the sun or does the sun go around us? What do dead bodies look like when you take the skin off? Thanks, Vesalius. What's this stuff look like under a microscope? What's this stuff look like outside the Earth with a telescope? Blah, 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 blah. What's gravity? Apple. All right, now the big thing, though, is that solves day-to-day life issues when you're talking about the scientific revolution, right? But there's something that scientists don't know how to fix, and that's like government theory, economics, the way that life is progressing during the 1700s. And I got into a tirade in all my classes during this point, talking about how cities are changing and people are learning to read and they're coming up with their own ideas and like all this crazy stuff is going on, right? So these 7 big Enlightenment thinkers come along during the 16th and 17th century, which is the 1700s, or the 1600s and the 1700s, right? Or the 15th, 16th century, or 17th and 18th century, 1600s, 1700s, that actually emphasize on individualism, rationalism, and a heavy effect on government theory. Now, the bulk of your Enlightenment thinkers are going to be coming from France, but the first 2 actually come from England, right? So the very first phase of the Enlightenment period starts out in jolly old London, right? So like not actually in London, but in actually England and stuff like that. And tip-top, cheerio, fish and chips is Tuesday. Now, anyway, so looking at the whole thing, though, when you talk about the English Enlightenment, you have to understand that we have 2 different Enlightenment thinkers that we have to go over, both existing around the same time as the other one did. For example, whenever John Locke actually is alive, he's over 40 years old when Thomas Hobbes finally dies, right? But to start everything off, the entire Enlightenment movement truly begins out of that whole Glorious Revolution period, out of that whole Commonwealth era, right? To give you a heads up, 1688 is the year that the Glorious Revolution happens when Mary runs her dad, James II, off and he flees away to France, right? So 1688, look at this, right? Thomas Hobbes dies right before that happens, and John Locke is alive when that happens. So Thomas Hobbes, most of his thought-provoking ideas are going to come out of the out of the Commonwealth period, talking about Cromwell, and actually he lived under Cromwell, and he really did not like the reign of Cromwell, and so he talked a lot about that as well. And then John Locke is going to come along and be and disagree with Hobbes completely. So the reason why I have them versing each other is because they're not very close to the same at all. So when you start off by talking about Thomas Hobbes, you have to understand that it's all focused around his famous work, right? His first primary famous work is a book known as the Leviathan, right? And the Leviathan was written in 1651. In 1651, he publishes this book, and to give you a heads up on what a Leviathan is, right? The Leviathan, the title of his book, is meant to be a metaphysical, metaphorical, and kind of allegorical concept referring to society in general. Because what a Leviathan is an ancient Greek beast of myth, right? This terrible, disgusting monster that would kill and destroy anything within its path, but you never actually saw its face, right? So, it lived in the depths underneath water, and it would destroy anything that came in front of its path. That was the Leviathan. So in this book, what is Hobbes referring to is the Leviathan. Well, that's the thing. He thinks you are a part of the Leviathan, right? Thomas Hobbes named his book The Leviathan because he believed truly that human beings are absolutely disgusting. Not like, did you wash your hands? Not like that kind of disgusting, but disgusting in the sense of y'all will kill, destroy, murder and eliminate to get what you want in life, right? He believes that humans are primal, and he believes that basically that if I have a cheeseburger right here and it's the zombie apocalypse and I put this cheeseburger in the middle of the floor, that y'all will dive into the floor like I saw Haley Lala do the other day over a thing of Swedish fish, and you will destroy anyone that gets in your way to get a hold of those Swedish fish, right? Or that cheeseburger in this zombie apocalypse. And not gonna lie, kind of think Hobbes is right a little bit, but I don't like the direction he goes with it, okay? So Hobbes then kind of took it in the direction of creating this concept known as the social contract, right? So the social contract is a big allegorical word. Do me a favor, describe the social contract next to the social contract. But he believed that a contract needed to be drawn up between people in society and their rulers, right? That basically someone is going to give so much to get so much. Because y'all know what a contract is, right? I agree to give you this, and you will agree to give me this, so we believe we're on equal footing. Well, in his idea, the social contract states that he says people who are disgusting and vile need to give up a bunch of their rights to an absolutist who will actually protect them, not from other people like outside the country, but protect you from yourself, right? So like protect you from yourself when you want to go and destroy and kill over those Swedish fish and stuff like that, right? Not gonna lie, I'd kill over Swedish fish. They're good stuff. Now, the biggest thing about it, though, is he advocates for absolutism in and of this essence. So as you can see, on the cover of his Leviathan, he has the people of the country make up the body that is the king, right? And the king is the noble protector with his sword and scepter that is there to defend people from their disgusting, nasty habits and keep them safe from one another. So he's like, you don't need freedom of speech. You don't need freedom of press. You don't need freedom of religion. You need to shut your mouth and listen to what your king tells you to do, right? And then everyone will be better off. That's Thomas Hobbes. Dude's pretty aggressive. Then you got John Locke who comes around, right? Now, we believe that Thomas Hobbes, a lot of his ideas kind of spawned out of that Commonwealth period, right? He's like, we can't trust this guy. Look at what a parliament gave us. A parliament gave us Cromwell. It's just like taking everything away. Blah, 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 blah. So now the big thing, though, on it as well, also some historians actually believe that he liked Cromwell, but that's an argument for a different day. Now, like going into it, though, then we got John Locke. John Locke, on the other hand, goes, whoa, pump the brakes, Tommy. All right, so like calm down over there. You need to realize that it's not the people that are disgusting. It's the government that is making us disgusting, right? So his famous works are on two treatises on government, and he has another really famous book called On Human Understanding. But the big one we're going to start off with talking about is we're going to talk about the two treatises of government, right? So the two treatises on government, John Locke writes this, and he says, no, Hobbes, no, you are wrong. People are born with natural rights, right? So like as you can see right here, natural law and natural rights, he believes that the social contract goes the other way around. He's like, no, no, no. You don't give your rights up to an absolutist. The government is there to protect your rights. Flip that social contract around. He should protect your rights because you have three key rights. Write these down. John Locke believes that you've got life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. Now, I know some of y'all are like, happiness? Calm down over there. One of you have watched too many Will Smith movies, and you've also read the Constitution, or the Declaration of Independence a couple too many times, right? So now looking at it, that quote, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that Thomas Jefferson ripped that off of John Locke's natural rights ideas of life, liberty, and property. He just changed the property part to the pursuit of happiness, right? To actually fit into a lot of his ideas and stuff like that. But we're not getting into that conversation right now. So he believes in the natural rights and the natural laws of life, liberty, and property, right? He flips that social contract around, and he also wrote a very famous book on how the human mind learns, right? So this is the one on human understanding right here. He actually considered human beings to be what's known as a tabula rasa, which actually in Latin means a blank slate, right? So saying basically that as you live your life, images and things are written on that blank slate, and it develops you as a human being. So that's a big thing that's happening as well. Scientists don't know how to, in the scientific revolution, figure out how we learn, so Enlightenment thinkers begin to try and tackle that bad boy, right? So now looking at the second phase of the Enlightenment, we have the second phase coming up. We got the French phase. Now the first guy right here in the French phase is a man by the name of Baron de Montesquieu, which is what one of my old former students referred to as Baron de Montesquieu. All right, so like, yeah, but you can call him Montesquieu, you can call him Montesquieu, you can call him Monte, whatever you want. I don't really care. But Montesquieu is a famous French philosopher and philosophe that comes up, because all these guys is what they're called, is philosophes, right? Not philosopher, but philosophe, right? Baron de Montesquieu wrote a couple of very, very famous books, and he got his entire writing career started when he wrote this book called The Persian Letters. And The Persian Letters was a book about two Persian travelers from the East that were traveling around France and kind of poking fun and making fun of a lot of the things that were going on at the time. Making fun of the opulence and the over-excess and the really, really going off the rails, and then also the poor people everywhere. So the Persian Letters were kind of taking a chance to mock, jeer, and make fun of the current state of European society at the time during the era of absolutism. And he used this book to expose the problems within society that were going on at the time, right? Through the eyes of an Easterner. Now, ironically enough, the Persians had their own problems. They believed in like polygamy and all these other things like that and stuff like that. But that's kind of a subtle little like allegorical thing that he uses to kind of poke fun at them as well. Now, getting into it though, that is how he grows his fame. But then he writes a very famous book, his first Enlightenment book, that he believes, you want to know how we fix the problems that all those Persians existed with? We separate the powers in our government, right? So like he actually observed France being gross and having all these poor people in the cities and no one's taking care of them. And then you've got the middle classes trying to like actually work and make money. And then you got the rich people living out in the countryside doing whatever they want, this massive wealth and opulence. And so he says, if we separate our powers like the British did, right? So if we actually create different branches of government, we'll actually make sure that those governments have checks and balances over each other. So this is the thing. His idea is the basis of the American and British government, right? Don't have all the power located in one person's hands. Have several branches of your government, right? For example, he believed wholeheartedly in the idea of the American government, having an executive, a legislative, and a judicial branch, and they all have powers over one of each other, known as checks and balances. And he wrote that in his Spirit of Laws book, which becomes very, very famous very, very quickly, but so famous that it actually got banned in France. Why would it be banned in France? Because France has an absolutist, and they would see this idea of separating your powers and checks and balances as a threat to absolute authority, right? So remember that in the back of your mind. His stuff's getting banned in France because he's got so many good ideas, and people are starting to read this, and they're like, wait a minute, a king shouldn't have all the power. The legislative body should. Look at Britain. They're making mad money right now. Why don't we do what they do? So it's inspiring a lot of ideas, right? So like, but then you've got the rock star, the metal god himself, out of all of them, Voltaire, right? Voltaire is probably the most famous Enlightenment thinker out of all of them. And he even looks really famous. Like, look at him. The dude, like, rocks the hairband look from the 1980s. He's very, very intense. I like him a lot, right? So now the big thing about it, though, is going into it. Voltaire, which is not his real name. His real name is Francois Marie Arouet. All right, so, like, now the thing about it is actually he changed his name so he could write these things and not be persecuted nor arrested. And the reason why I got to bring that up is because he was persecuted and arrested multiple times. He actually spent a couple of stints in jail at one point, right? There's fun facts. You can see that right over here. And he wrote a bunch of very, very famous books, right? He wrote a book called Candide, which talks about this man journeying through his life with this weird kind of optimistic sense and all the things being imprinted upon him, him discovering the true way that society works, right? He also wrote a very famous book called Letters on the English, right? Where he talked about his love for the English system, because what happened is he actually rigged the lottery at one point, was about to be arrested and be thrown in jail, and he actually ran away to England and spent some time over there, and he was exposed to the ideas of religious tolerance, right? He was exiled from France. He loved the English system, and he loved like actually observing this one particular thing about the English system, the trading block and the stock market in the English, like at the actual English like trading house, and saying that, wow, look at these men coming together to make money and sell stocks and bonds. And they don't care what religion the other guy is. They're only here in the pursuit of one God, that of the dollar, or the money, or of money in general, right? So now look, religious tolerance is one of his key ideas. He believes that looking back in history, we can relate all of these crazy power struggles and the strife of many people to the fact that we aren't accepting each other's religions, right? And Voltaire is very, very keen on this and very, very smart, because these are 100% facts. Like, this is factual. Like, literally, because the religious intolerance is what actually led to wars, led to the death of over 2 million people throughout the continent during the 30 Years' War. He also believed, though, as well, that we needed to abolish torture and the death penalty, because he says it is not up to a government to torture a man nor take his life, right? And he also loathes the idea of fanaticism. Fanaticism is somebody being fanatic about something, like somebody like turning a blind eye to the things that are negative about a concept because they are just so fanatic about it, right? He hates idolatry, and he relates the fanaticism and idolatry concepts to the religious organizations at the time and he also hates superstition. The other big thing about him, too, is write this down, is he brought up the idea of deism, right? Deism, which many of the American founding fathers were deists after the ideas of Voltaire. Deism is the idea that God created the world and then took a step back, and he's observing everything that's happening. He doesn't have an active role in our lives like that, right? So Voltaire is not only bringing out new ideas about religion, he's advocating for religious tolerance, he's saying we should get rid of the death penalty, and he hates those ideas of religious fanaticism and idolatry. And he also hates governmental and cultural fanaticism and idolatry, right? And a lot of this all because he rigged the lottery and got locked up a couple times because he's a rock star, right? Now, the big thing though also is Denis Diderot, right? Denis Diderot, or Denis Diderot, is very, very famous as well for writing another very key book. And I know you're probably like, what else? No, just the encyclopedia, okay? Denis Diderot actually writes this thing called the Encyclopedia, where he actually takes all the ideas of Montesquieu, Voltaire, Hobbes, John Locke, and any other thinker at the time, and he begins to collect them in one single tome, right? One book that can be leafed through and actually analyzed very quickly and actually can be used to reference for academics, right? And also, guess what happens to that book? Also banned in France, right? So, man, these absolutists in France are doing their best to try and suppress some ideas, right? Some scary stuff. You should never be banning books nor suppressing ideas, right? It's scary. Not good. Don't do it, right? So now, look. So that's a big one. And then we got another face. French? Well, this is the weird one, okay? So then there's this dude, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, right? Jean-Jacques Rousseau is technically not French, but he spent most of his time in his career in France, right? Writing several very famous key works, all right? So now, the big thing about him being French is he's not actually French at all. He's Swiss, right? He's actually from Switzerland, and he actually was the child of a watchmaker, right? And so he adopted this idea of meticulous thought and theory, that of creating and putting together the pieces of a watch, which technically aren't even called parts, they're called complications because they're so tiny and small, right? And so after the death of his father and the encouragement of him to actually going and becoming a lawyer, he actually is exposed to all these new thoughts and ideas, and he moves to France and he goes to Paris and he begins to observe all these disgusting, nasty things around him, right? Poor people, decrepit people, people using, people being addicted to alcohol, people being suppressed by the government, all this other stuff. And he begins to just kind of break down and be like, oh my God, what are we doing? We are disgusting. And he writes a very famous book called The Social Contract. And in that book he says, man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. So basically what he begins to allude to is the idea that humans are born awesome, but society ruins them, right? So he's taking kind of this weird, interesting, little middle ground between John Locke and Thomas Hobbes, right? So the big thing about his ideas in The Social Contract is he begins to kind of bring up the fact that society has ruined humanity, that it's led to a terrible view of religion, that it's taken us away from nature, and that actually we should go back out into the woods and live with a garden and a hut and provide for ourselves and be much more like the noble savage. Actually, in his book, The Social Contract, he talks about the Native Americans that actually the Americans were coming into contact with during this time, saying those people were peaceful, happy, and lived fantastic lives until people came and forced upon them alcohol and other forms of modernity, right? And so he begins to create these different ideas, and he has this other really good book called Emile, where he actually starts talking about the education of children and how children need to be educated and that they shouldn't wear tight clothes when they're young. They should be wearing billowy, fun, free things so babies can roll around and experience the world around them, and that they should wander through the woods and learn and be free and also one with the environment around them, right? So the thing about it is, though, is that all these ideas about moving out into the woods and raising your kids in the woods and giving them a big pillowcase to roll around in aren't really reasonable, right? So he comes up with this concept of, okay, I know that we're not going to abandon these cities, but if we don't, we need to adopt this concept right here, and you need to highlight this bad boy right there, the general will. And in the general will, his key idea is, should the group decide an idea, that's the way society should go. Basically having a majority vote system, right? So the basic way he comes up with a general will is he says, if over 50% of us believe that we should do this as a society and group, then we should, right? So he's trying to allude to the idea that you should listen to all people, listen to their ideas, give them the ability to vote and decide their own fate, right? Now, the terrible thing about the general will, though, is the idea is well, what if everybody believes in something bad or stupid or racist, right? Well, so ooh. So that's a big component that we'll talk about a little bit later on. And then he also had some really stupid ideas on gender, basically saying that women should, like, stay in the house and stuff like that. He actually had 5 daughters at one point, and he gave all of them away to orphanages. What a tool. Like, I absolutely hate Jean-Jacques Rousseau. But anyway, like, I like his ideas. I don't like the person, though. Now, anyway, really quick, though, last big Enlightenment thinker you need to know of before we talk about some other little things that are going on inside of Europe at the time is a Scottish Enlightenment thinker by the name of Adam Smith, right? Now, what I need you to do right now is go ahead and put 2 lines through that S in Adam Smith, because Adam Smith is all about making money, right? So, like, Adam Smith is the very first guy to come along and define the new current economic system in his book called The Wealth of Nations. He writes The Wealth of Nations in 1776, the same year that America begins its revolutionary process, and he brings in the ideas of capitalism, without even naming it capitalism, right? He actually advocates for the ideas of a free market trade society, right? Basically, in a nutshell, in a free market trade society is entrepreneurs own their businesses, and they are allowed to sell their product to anybody they want regardless of government regulation. He believes in free markets where everyone can use and make money off each other, and the only involvement that a government should have is by slight taxation upon their profits. Now, this is another key thing right here, laissez-faire economics. He believes that the government should not regulate businesses and actually prevent them from doing anything, that the government should stay out of business and economics altogether and just exist for the public good. Provide defense, provide infrastructure, and provide the things that society needs, right? So we actually base a lot of our current government systems off the ideas of, like, Adam Smith, right? Now, the other big thing, though, lastly, is he also believes in this thing known as the invisible hand of competition, right? The idea of the invisible hand is that basically, in a nutshell, if you have 2 people who make the same product, they are going to compete with one another, and it's either going to make their products better or make them cheaper, so the consumer will win no matter what. As in, this invisible hand is pushing and pulling them backwards and forwards, making sure that the market will regulate itself, right? Now, Adam Smith's goals are a little lofty, and a lot of people are like, oh, well, does he believe in this, that, and the other? He actually does believe in some things, like he believes in minimum wage. He believes in actually, like, people's wages being compensatory to the profit margins and things like that. So it's a very, very interesting figure to talk about. Now, the thing about it, though, is, last but not least, before I let you guys go, because we've got a couple more minutes left, you need to also understand, though, is that, yes, those Enlightenment thinkers are very important, but now I need you to give me a new title, a new break in the title. And you also need to know that you are going to have a quiz before you leave for Mardi Gras break. I'll let you know when that is the next time I see you. Please make sure to ask, right? But the state of the West in the 1700s and 1800s, going out of the Enlightenment period and going into the 1800s, is going to be very, very important, okay? You got these Enlightenment thinkers walking around being like, separate your powers, tolerate other religions, social contract, life, liberty, property, and people are getting all these new ideas, right? Well, it's being reflected by the fact that there's a lot of money being made out there with high economics. You got colonies all over the place, right, in North America and South America. But here's the issue you got. Out of these 2 positive things, you've also got absolutists who are in control. Now, I don't think colonialism is a good thing, but you understand what I'm saying. Absolutists are also in control. So the state of the West is the fact that there's a lot of money being made, but it's not making itself into the lower classes. There are colonies everywhere, which are benefiting the monarch and the nobility, and you've got absolutists in control. So you have all of this money in the hands of a very small fraction of society, right? Which is a very scary thing and leads to a lot of power discrepancies, right? And also what this is going to lead to is that absolutists are going to begin to fight over different colonies, and colonial wars are going to break out, causing a massive amount of debt, right? And the 2 key ones are the French and Indian War and the 7 Years' War, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to pick up on discussing these 2 wars when I see you again next in class, and we're also going to play a little bit of a game. I'm very, very excited about it. Y'all have a good one. I'll talk to you soon.